Wolf back. What is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with another Monday 4 p.m. best ball stream. And of course, a topic ahead of time today. Getting a little feisty, getting into some ranking debates. I thought it would be some fun content to dive into who in my rankings, my man Mo over here. We typically agree. We have similar philosophies on how to build, who we typically want to attack, what positions, what ranges. We've gone through all those positional breakdowns. Go check them out if you missed those ones before. And after all this agreement, it felt time to put on the gloves and finally start disagreeing a little bit. So Mo looked through my rankings. He picked out 4 players that he is the most misaligned with compared to me. And we're going to definitely just go through. He's got 2 he's higher on than I am. I've got 2 I'm higher on than him. Both 2 receivers, 2 running backs. We're going to dive into those guys, and then we're going to fire up a draft as we always do. And as always, your likes, your shares, your retweets, especially early on in the video, are so greatly appreciated if you enjoy what you're hearing. And of course, get those questions, those comments on in. We will answer them all as we kick off the draft. But thank you again, guys, so much for being on here. Let's start at the top with DeVonta Smith. And I'm going to let you start, Mo. We're going to go with the positives first, and that kind of gives it away. I'm on the negative side here with DeVonta Smith, and I don't hate the player at all. In fact, I actually really love the guy's game, but I've got a few reasons why I'm not quite as high on him, at least at his current ADP. So I'd love to hear your case, Mo. Why are you higher on DeVonta Smith than myself?
I just want to preface this by saying I'm no like DeVonta Smith bull. I'm drafting him right around ADP. I like grabbing him at the 2-3 turn in these best ball drafts, and you see a lot of people doing it to correlate with CD Lamb to get that week 17 correlation going, and I think that's a fair price, just right around the low end wide receiver, or the middling wide receiver 2 threshold is right where I think he should be going, and that's where ADP slots him in. And I'm more just curious to hear why you're all the way out on him, or not all the way out, but a significant step back in the market. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's been fairly consistent in the last 2 seasons, just about 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, 14 to 15 fantasy points per game in both of the last 2 seasons. And he's broke 1,000 yards in 2 straight seasons. It was 2 back-to-back seasons of the first time in Eagles franchise history with multiple 1,000-yard receivers, being A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. And in 2022, we've seen that he has the ability to earn 130-plus targets. So we're talking about one of the most dynamic 1-2 punches at the wide receiver position in the NFL. And the last 2 seasons, he's been a fairly consistent wide receiver too. He has his spike weeks, and he's not going to be the most consistent guy given the presence of A.J. Brown. But I mean, he's consistently produced as a quality fantasy asset. But things are changing this year. We've got Kellen Moore entering the fray in Philadelphia. And if you stuck around for these shows last year, you knew I was really bullish on Kellen Moore heading over to Los Angeles. It didn't really work out given all the injuries and other things going on there in Los Angeles. But moving back to Philadelphia last year, the critiques of this offense were that it was just kind of stale and stalling out throughout or over the course of the season. And I just don't see that happening with Kellen Moore. From an overall macro perspective, Kellen Moore's consistently delivered quality offenses at an NFL level. Before he was with the Los Angeles Chargers last year, but prior to that, he was the 4 years as the offensive coordinator in Dallas. And he had 3 full years with Dak Prescott as his quarterback. Prescott was injured in 2022, and you got that mix of like Andy Dalton and all those random guys, Ben DiNucci getting starts. So kind of throw that one out the window. But in those 3 full years with Dak Prescott, the Cowboys ranked 6th, 1st, and 4th in total scoring offense, 1st, and 11th in total yardage gained during those seasons. So pretty high quality performances. And then kind of shrinking it down, looking to a less macro perspective, Kellen Moore has been a very fantasy-friendly offensive coordinator throughout his career. Just anecdotally, you think about the seasons that CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen last year had under Kellen Moore, some of their best years. CeeDee Lamb obviously went on to absolutely go nuclear last season, but still really high-quality fantasy performances in a Kellen Moore offense. And you might be asking, like, how can an offensive coordinator make this environment so fantasy friendly? It's because he provides receivers with those layup targets that we consistently talk about, and he uses motion at a really high rate to give receivers those layup targets. He used motion on 58% of dropbacks, or 58% of snaps last year, which was the 5th highest rate in the league. The Eagles last year ranked 30th in this metric, and they just really didn't utilize motion to get their wide receivers into those easy looks, get them those layup targets. And we know that motion has a really high value in terms of its correlation of fantasy points. On routes where wide receivers were put into motion, on average, this is courtesy of Dwayne McFarland over at Fantasy Life, he found that on routes where receivers are in motion, they score 55% more fantasy points than on routes where they're not in motion. And I think Smith is a candidate to see some of those looks. AJ Brown is obviously a candidate as well, given his like immense yak ability. But Smith is that slot guy. They've both been successful on shorter routes, and I just think that this offense is going to be humming and firing on all cylinders under Kellen Moore. I'm just really bullish on what he can do in terms of the consistency and the overall offensive output that he brings to this offense. So I just want to be buying shares of this Eagles offense left and right, and that includes getting DeVonta Smith at cost.
I think you outlined a lot of interesting takes there, and certainly the ceiling take is Kellen Moore taking this offense to a new level. And I'll get to that. I have some stats on that will actually support your cause, and I think it's a solid case. But ultimately, I look at this. Okay, wide receiver 18 price tag, second round pick. Wide receiver 39, 16, and 21 in fantasy points per game. Seems to me like we're buying him at his ceiling, and I just don't know that we will ultimately get enough. Maybe Kellen Moore propels him to a ceiling we haven't seen, but ultimately surrounded by A.J. Brown. Now Saquon comes in, and it's another huge mouth to feed. They're already talking about CMC-style usage for Christian McCaffrey. I think every single running back in the NFL might be Christian McCaffrey, according to every report I've read. So I'll take that with a grain of salt. But still, it is a big mouth. They gave the guy a huge contract. So I just don't know that a Kellen Moore addition is enough to repel a guy that's been 30th, 13th, 23rd in targets, 34th, 9th, and 16th in receptions, 34th, 8th, and 20th. And so, yeah, maybe we could see a return to that middle year, that 2020, where he was again, wide receiver 16, but is that the ceiling we're really looking for in that second round turn or so, where I could get a guy like Devon Achane, who I truly think could break fantasy this season, a guy like Mike Evans, who, yeah, he's on the back nine of his career, but we just saw him absolutely thrive with Baker Mayfield. I do think this is more of a bump. This guy in the big board was going round 3-4 turn. I was loading up all day on DeVonta Smith. I love that price tag. It seems to me like people are correlation is so important. I know the week 17 in best ball and how much it matters. We have a whole show on that, but ultimately he's jumped nearly a full round for the sake of correlation, in my opinion. And to me, he's really going to be dependent on getting that slot role in Kellen Moore's offense. Now, if he does, if I'm reading this offseason that he is the clear-cut go-to slot guy in camp, okay, I will definitely change my tune. I would love him at the end of round 2 if that's the case. You already outlined the fact you're top 5 in yards from scrimmage in 4 or 5 seasons for Kellen Moore, top 6 in points per game 4 or 5 years, top 4 in situation neutral pace 4 or 5, top 7 in plays per game in all 5 seasons, and then all the motion stuff you mentioned. There's so many good statistics. Jacob Gibbs has a phenomenal tweet thread on this where he talks about CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen. They thrive because of that motion usage, moving into the slot, getting favorable matchups. Last year, Keenan Allen scored this crazy snap here, 105 PPR points because of pre-snap motion routes. He had never scored more than 40 points as a pre-snap motion man in a season prior to teaming up with Moore. And we similarly saw CeeDee Lamb lead the NFL in 87 PPR points as the pre-snap motion man the year before. So, yeah, he schemes up these wide receiver 1 layup looks so well, but you're going to have a hard time convincing me that that's DeVonta Smith over A.J. Brown, because in that same tweet thread, yeah, Jacob Gibbs did note Smith was actually 7th in terms of yards per route run when he's out of the slot, but only 23% slot rate, was not super high there. But then he also looked at the fact that like these were a lot of short yardage layup looks, and nobody in the NFL has been better at gaining that yak and on routes of just 5 yards or fewer. A.J. Brown leads the NFL by a pretty significant margin in total yards because of how deadly he is after the catch. I don't know that anybody's better. So to me, this whole Kellen Moore offense, I'm actually more excited for A.J. Brown. I can't believe he continues to fall to 10, 11, 12. I think he should be a clear top 7 pick in these drafts. I think he's going to be the one that really ends up gaining. Should we see it's DeVonta Smith, sure. The only other thing I would maybe pour a little cold water on Kellen Moore, and I don't know that I fully buy this, but his only season when he was not with Mike McCarthy. We just saw Mike McCarthy's offense with the Cowboys. Everybody wants to hate on him. It's Mike McCarthy. It's old. It's ugly. I mean, they just lit up the NFL, top in passing, top in scoring. And Kellen Moore's Chargers, where everybody, including me, including you last year, I know we talked about it a ton. Justin Herbert, the cannon arm, now meets Kellen Moore, the master of pace, the master of scheming. Well, that offense really was not great. And there's injuries and there's line issues. And I'm not fully ready to write off Kellen Moore. But I am a little bit less hesitant to be like, this guy is the catalyst of monster seasons. When he leaves and we see the offense he leaves continue to hum at a great pace, but his offense that he gets the final full control. He talked all offseason. This is going to be his offense. Nobody's in his way in terms of Staley saying, I'm the defense, he's the O. I'm going to let him cook and do his thing. The results weren't great. So I'm just a little bit hesitant to call Kellen Moore this world changer. And if he is, I'm not convinced it's going to be DeVonta Smith that takes that boost. I think it might be A.J. Brown.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I'm willing to make all the excuses for Kellen Moore last season. Just the injuries and the fact that the guy that was replaced with those injuries is one of the bigger stone cold busts that we've seen, at least in terms of his rookie performance in Quentin Johnston. I'm willing to make the excuses for Kellen Moore, but I agree. We'll have to, hopefully we'll just get some sort of quote and some clarification on who is getting those like slot looks and those motion routes and those layup targets in training camp. Something comes out like during an interview or just some beat reporter notices something during camp. That would be ideal, but I'm just looking to buy this offense regardless. So that's just kind of my philosophy of where I'm at now. And you know how much of an AJ Brown bull I have been during these drafts.
Absolutely. So. I think that's fair. And I would not be shocked at all if this offense does end up lighting it up and Kellen Moore gets a resurgence. I think the piece that I'm not fully in on at that price is DeVonta Smith right now. But hey, we'll see how it shakes out. Definitely one of the most important training camp stories to monitor will be who is in the slot. If we get like AJ Brown and slot reports coming out of camp, like he's the clear dominant guy and he's getting Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb usage, we should expect wide receiver 2-3 numbers out of A.J. Brown in that type of role. And DeVonta Smith, if it's going to be him, top 10 upside would be there. I'll have to see that before I believe it and buy in at this price that he's currently going at right now. Moving on to the receiver that I'm higher on than you, that is Jordan Addison, another number 2 wide receiver that I think is going to really break out yet again, despite a very impressive rookie year. He already had a solid offense, whereas we're buying him. The last guy we talked about, DeVonta Smith, to me seems like we're buying him at his ceiling. I feel like we're buying Jordan Addison at his floor, going at pick 67, wide receiver 39 in these best ball drafts right now. He was the wide receiver 30 as a rookie last year. That despite missing nearly all of spring workouts and camp. Actually, wide receiver 30 in points per game. Wide receiver 23 in total fantasy points, just 7 below DeVonta Smith, who's going 21 spots ahead of him. 10th in total touchdowns, 20th in air yards, 29th in receiving yards. All very solid. He's actually one of 4 players in NFL history to record 70 receptions, 900 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns in his rookie season. The people he is running with, Bill Groman from 1960, no clue who that is, but seems like an awesome, absolute beast. But the other names, Odell Beckham and Jamar Chase. Very, very impressive quality to be keeping. Very impressive rookie type of smash season. So, yeah, I'd like to bet on Addison himself, but I also like to bet on Kevin O'Connell. Fast-paced, pass-heavy offense has been phenomenal for fantasy purposes, even with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall at QB for 9 starts. The Vikings were top 5 in pass yards last year. Nick Mullins was the only quarterback, started 3 games last year, the only QB in the entire NFL to have 395 passing yards or more than once. And I know they came against the Lions. I know that's going to be the counter you bring up. And it's fair. It was a bad Lions defense. But if Nick Mullins can literally have the most high yard games in the NFL back-to-back times, I think it's part of this offense, and it's not a Nick Mullins thing myself. Since he became the Vikings head coach, 3rd and 4th in pass attempts, 6th and 5th in passing yards, and 4th and 4th in passing touchdowns. And the year before he came to them was with the Rams, 10th in attempts, 5th in yards, and 2nd in TDs. That McVay-Shanahan tree has been a goldmine for fantasy. Kevin O'Connell, the latest branch that is dominating. So I like the player. I like the scheme. I understand, Justin Jefferson's going to be back. There's about 3 points per game, a little less than 3 points per game more for Jordan Addison when Jefferson was out. That's pretty obviously why when you have an alpha, a vacuum like Jefferson there. But he actually did average more yards, 43% more receptions, and 32% more yards in games with Jefferson. So he just had a couple touchdowns not go his way in those games, but actually was more productive in the other fantasy metrics that typically stick more year to year. And then you look at the fact that Hawkinson's going to be out for probably 6 to 8 weeks, maybe longer. I don't see anybody behind Jefferson and Jordan Addison, one of the pass happiest offenses in the league. They really didn't add anybody. In fact, the only other guy, KJ Osborne, is now gone with the Patriots here. What if he just gets better himself? All the offseason talk so far from Kevin O'Connell, Jordan Addison had as good of an offseason as you can ask for, really from a standpoint of getting stronger, getting a bit more comfortable playing through contact, still playing with that great burst and transition that he has. You saw some real growth there this spring. So what if he just does take yet another step working with Keenan McCardell? He already talked about my clear plan this offseason was to get better at my releases, strengthen up, which is one of the few areas he didn't do well was against the press. We saw that in college as well. He clearly targeted where he wants to get better. So even if he just stayed the same, he's already kind of discounted at this price. But if he takes yet another step forward, I know the glaring quarterback question is the only other one here now, and who's that going to be? Kirk Cousins was obviously significant boost for him, but I do think J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold can get you Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, and Josh Dobbs again. The number 5 pass offense in the league, even though those guys started over half the season. I'm not overly concerned, even with a slight regression from the quarterback here. It'd have to be a massive regression, in my opinion, to outweigh all the things going for Addison himself, for the coaching scheme, for the fact that he might even take another step ahead.
Just the overall Kevin O'Connell offense, it's tough to not buy the pass catchers. Just also considering Hawkinson not being a part of the offense for likely the first half of the season, potentially even longer, and maybe like moving into like week 12 or so, we might not even see Hawkinson. But just it's hard to be out on a guy who showed talent last year. He, like you mentioned, one of the only, I don't know the entire stat line that you had there, but one of the only 4 receivers for 70 catches, 900 yards, 10 touchdowns was the stat line. Yeah. So that's an incredibly impressive season. But you kind of just dig a little closer or a little deeper into what he did and some of his deeper metrics that led to that performance. And you look at a guy who was a pedestrian target earner and just not incredibly efficient with those looks. Last season, there was 81 wide receivers in the NFL who saw 50 plus targets. Addison ranked 59th in targets per route run, 46th in total target share, and then just general efficiency, 51st in yards per route run. So not anything that really jumps off the page, and not necessarily just stuff that jumps off the page. It's something that could kind of make you shy away. It's something that concerns me with Addison, just those target earning and overall efficiency metrics. And then you look a little closer at his season that led to that overall production, and it's not really hard to realize. You kind of just look at his overall stat line, 70 receptions for 10 touchdowns. You can kind of see that Addison's a candidate for touchdown regression, and just a seventh of his catches going for touchdowns. And you kind of once again you look closer at those plays. 5 touchdowns were of 37 yards or worth 37 yards or longer. And those are the hardest plays to reproduce in all of football. And those 5 plays accounted for 26% of his total fantasy production. And this kind of ties back into the quarterback downgrade that you mentioned. I mean, it's easy to do those things with quality quarterback play in Kirk Cousins, or a guy who's just has a DGAF mentality like Nick Mullins, just willing to huck the ball down the field because he knows that he's got to do something big to keep a job in the NFL, not just a job as a starter, just to stay in the NFL. He knows he's got to make big plays. I mean, that's just kind of been one of Nick Mullins' calling card, is just being more than willing to get the ball deep downfield. So, and then he's moving to J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold, whichever poison the Vikings decide to go with. I mean, I just don't see him being able to reproduce those plays at the same level. 5 touchdowns of 37 yards or longer. That's just not something that I see in the cards for Jordan Addison in 2024. And then the last thing I have here is just some splits with the significant players. You mentioned the splits with Justin Jefferson, 14.7 points per game in 7 games without Jefferson, 11.8 points per game in games with Jefferson. And that's like, it's hard to project what those are going to shake out to be given the lack of Hawkinson. But once again, it's not great to look at. I mean, if he was averaging those 11.8 points per game that we saw in those 10 games with Jefferson across a full season, it's not perfect analysis or math, but that's wide receiver 40 across a full season in terms of points per game, and that's just not ideal. And then the other key player that he had significant splits with was Kirk Cousins, and that kind of comes back to the quarterback situation that I was talking about. He posted an abysmal 1.21 yards per route run in games without Kirk Cousins last season, and in those games he averaged 42.9 yards per game. It's just like, this is, once again, I was kind of talking about the relative inefficiency and pedestrian nature with his target earning metrics and his yards per route run. This is even worse. It is 42.9 yards per game, 1.21 yards per route run. 1.21 yards per route run is god awful. And then once again, moving back to the touchdowns, 3 total touchdowns in games without Kirk Cousins. So there's just so many things working against Addison being able to reproduce the type of splash plays that he saw last year, and then just his general inefficiency and lack of target earning. I don't see it all coming together for Addison in year 2 to pay off at cost. And I just think that there's going to be one legitimate asset in this passing game, and I think it's going to be Justin Jefferson. I mean, I think the fantasy community and people in general are more than willing to look past a quarterback downgrade with a guy like Jefferson, but with Addison and kind of what he showed last year, I'm not willing to look past that quarterback downgrade, and I think we're not going to be thrilled with the numbers that he puts out this year.
I think those are all very fair warts to bring up, and in particular the splits without Cousins, the reliance on splash plays, all very, very true. And part of the reason to be concerned with him, my hope is, again, should he take that natural step in terms of a tackle breaker after the catch becomes more of a threat there, plus you mix in the fact that TJ Hawkinson, you've got those splits, 15 points per game without Hawkinson. I know it was only 2 games, but he did not have Kirk Cousins in either of those games either. So I do think that little mix could be enough to propel him at minimum. Again, 11 points per game was that downside with Jefferson there. That wide receiver 40, well, that's his price tag right now. So to me, again, buying at the floor, when I do think there's a ceiling, even with that quarterback change, I understand why it might not be the ceiling. He would not be going where he is if Kirk Cousins was there. There's no doubt about it. It's all fair points. We shall see how it shakes out. We're going to now move to some running backs, Wolfpack, but nearly 160 of you with us. Thank you so much for being here. If you'd like what you're hearing, please do consider that thumbs up. Good to see you, Joe. Great to see you, Ian. And also some great questions coming in from Gabe. Great to see you, Mitch, as well. We will answer all those questions in about 15-ish minutes when we kick off that draft. I'd love to talk about that Miami backfield. It's something I am super high on here. So I look forward to answering that one, Gabe, if you're willing to stick around for about 15 more minutes. But please, again, consider that thumbs up button if you like what you're hearing. Let's move on to the running back position. Brian Robinson right now going as the running back 30, 106 overall ADP. I am not the bull here, so I'm going to let you start off, Mo, and lead off. It's a really tough position to not be in on Robinson because as a human being, you can't love this guy anymore. Gets shot and then comes back like a few games later and it's just bowling over people, one of the hardest runners in the league. There is so much I love about him, but I do have a couple concerns that make me pass up on him at his current price. But hey, this is a player I'm willing to be sold on. So I'd like to hear your take why you're in on Brian Robinson at his price right now.
Yeah, so you're at RB 37 with Robinson. The market's got him at RB 30, and he's been steadily trickling up over the last couple weeks. Yeah. I think the last time that we talked about him briefly, he was floating around RB 33, RB 34. But I'm still in on Robinson at RB 30 price tag. I mean, we saw just last season. Let's take a look at what he did last year. So 178 total carries on 214 total touches. So that includes receptions, and he handled 65% of the rush attempts. And that was legitimate usage as a rusher, not anything crazy, but he was an offensive focal point. He was the clear rushing back. He was the clear 2-down back, and he got the goal line work. And in terms of his usage as a receiver, he wasn't really highly utilized. He was incredibly effective as a receiver. He was one of the league leaders among running backs in terms of yards per route run, yards per target, yards per yards per reception. He was incredibly efficient with his looks. He just didn't get a lot of them. He was 41st among running backs in target share with 7.1% target share. So nothing really to be impressed with there. And he was 29th in total targets with 40 total targets. So basically a non-factor in the receiving game, not a complete zero, but it's not something that, and it's not a facet of his game that you bank on to really contribute to his fantasy production. But like I said, incredibly efficient with the looks that he got. So when he does get looks, I mean, you can expect him to do something with the ball. And all that coming together, he finished as the RB21 overall in fantasy football last year in PPR formats. And now looking forward to 2024, people are scared of Brian Robinson because Austin Eckler is in town. And like, before I get a little bit further into this, like, come on, like Austin Eckler. I mean, like, you can say what you want about the high ankle sprain and whatnot last year, but he looked god awful last year. And it just wasn't anything that I was impressed by. He looks like he's really fallen off the age cliff. And Eckler, in general, has never been a high-volume rusher. He's never had more than 210 rush attempts, and he's consistently been in a committee, not consistently in the recent years, but earlier in his career, he was in a committee in Los Angeles with Melvin Gordon, splitting carries. He was typically getting in the range of 120 rush attempts. So I don't expect Austin Eckler to really be contributing much as a rusher. His primary contributions to this offense will come as a pass catcher. But we saw Brian Robinson succeed as primarily a rusher last year. He had only handled 65% of the rush attempts, very minimal usage as a pass catcher, and still finished as the RB21. So we've seen Antonio Gibson was there, and some weeks it was Chris Rodriguez was getting looks as a pass catcher. We've seen Brian Robinson succeed with a similar projected workload in terms of just being the primary first and second down back, getting the goal line looks. And I know that you're a fan of Eckler's capabilities at the stripe, but I still think that Brian Robinson will be the go-to guy back at the goal line, and this could kind of be the breaking point for the key point for Robinson's success as a fantasy asset is whether or not he gets those goal line looks. But just overall, he has succeeded in a similar role that people are expecting him to have in 2024. He's drafted as a middling RB3. Yet he finished as a low-end RB2 last season with just primarily rushing work. And then just in terms of looking at the overall Commanders offense, total disaster last year, nothing going right for them. Incredibly high pass volume, one of the highest pass rates in the entire NFL under Eric Bieniemy as the OC, and that was just kind of in part to their just abysmal defense. But now we've got Cliff Kingsbury in Washington, and you can say what you want about his offense as a whole, but he's produced some quality running backs for fantasy and a really high pace offense, some of the highest paced offenses during his time in Arizona. So I just think that this an increased play volume plays to Robinson's favor. And then Jaden Daniels being the quarterback, there's always that narrative of mobile quarterbacks allowing their running backs to increase their rushing efficiency because you just got to account for two guys out of the backfield. So Robinson's got that going for him, as well as what I expect to be hopefully an increased overall volume in terms of his number of rush attempts, just due to the high pace of Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So but my main point is really that he succeeded and was a RB2 in fantasy football in a role where he was handling just the majority of rushing work, 65% of rush attempts, and not much of a receiving role. I don't see much being different in 2024. And there's an argument for the offensive environment as a whole improving. So I just don't get the RB30 price tag, and I'm willing to invest in him as a low-end RB2, high-end RB3.
I think you bring up a lot of compelling points. So and again, I like the player. I had him in a lot of leagues last year, and he really did pay off. Again, that running back 21 and some huge spike weeks mixed in there. So I think I could be swayed to bump him up. I'm already kind of softening my stance on him. I do think I'm a little low at running back 37. I think I do want to bump him up to ADP. But I guess my biggest concern is, what if Eckler is not dust? What if he just was actually hurt and he can actually still ball out and is just better in a complementary role where he's not the main focal point. He himself said, I don't want to be getting 300 touches. That's not my style. And we've seen that in the past. Anthony Lynn, the running back coach, is the first guy to make sure and go out and get Eckler, who he had his biggest years under when Anthony Lynn was there with the Chargers, a guy that saw 108, 93, and 127 targets, 92 catches, 70 catches, and 107 receptions in those 3 seasons, running back 7, 14, 3, and 1.5 PPR points per game. Now, again, I get it. If he's dust, none of those stats matter, and he sure looked like dust midway through that year, that 13-mile-per-hour run against the Packers. We've all seen it. It doesn't get any uglier than that. I don't have much of a counter, but high ankle sprains are no joke. And if that thing was lingering all year, which I imagine it was, the only game he had without it was week 1. What did he do? 26.4 fantasy points. The running back 2 that week hit nearly 20 miles per hour that game, 19.88, faster than anything Josh Jacobs logged on the season the entire year. So I am not ready to completely write off Austin Eckler, an absolute workout warrior, the type of guy that he's one that I wouldn't just completely I can't get over Austin Eckler's past. I can't get over the work ethic, the pride this guy has in his game. I would not discount the fact that he could just come back and be very similar, even 90%, 80% Austin Eckler from what we saw with the Chargers, maybe on a lesser workload, sure. But based on those stats I just said, plus the fact that 38 touchdowns in his last 2 seasons before last year's debacle. They know the guy can score, and I do think he is a touchdown maven. He gets behind the lineman, given that short stature. You can't even see him, and then he has some of the strongest leg drive in the entire NFL. He is so good at the stripe. I mean, it's automatic. Even last year when he was garbage, he still was able to pound in the touchdowns whenever they got in close. So I would not discount the fact that this guy eats significantly into the receiving work, significantly in the touchdowns, and we know fantasy success is so dependent on both touchdowns and receiving work. I would not even argue against the fact that, yeah, maybe Brian Robinson more efficient as a 2-down back, given the Jaden Daniels threat, given the better offense overall. There's some great stats about Kingsbury and his running back usage, especially in the red zone and the touchdowns he generates for them. I just worry that if Eckler's dust, then Robinson is going to destroy this ADP. And that's probably why I should be a little more in on, because there is a very real chance Eckler is Dutch. And I do like Robinson. And if he is just like the feature back in this offense and Eckler is toast, my God, he's going to be one of the best picks of the year. So I do need to get more in on him. I have definitely been a little bit lower, but I am not willing to completely write off Austin Eckler because of that bad stretch, given the high ankle sprain. It will be worth monitoring in camp. And again, you can't just overreact to Eckler looks like his old self. It's training camp. It's beats. They might just be blowing smoke up your ass. But ultimately, I am going to be interested to see, like, is Austin Eckler zipping around in preseason action? Does he look like he's got some juice? Because if he does, he is the exact type of nuisance that will take the most valuable touches and ultimately could outscore Brian Robinson going 30 picks later. So I've been investing in this backfield with the Eckler route. I do probably want to get some more Brian Robinson because you did make some compelling points. I do love the player. I love the grit. So it's hard to go against him. And I do think I'm a little too low because the off chance Eckler is dust. And not even the off chance. Like, I'd probably put it at like maybe 50-50 at this point. And a lot of people seem to be putting it at like 70% chance he's dust. And I'm not willing to write off Austin Eckler quite that fast.
Yeah, I just think like I kind of laid out, I'm not really worried about the receiving work, that the receiving skill that Eckler brings, because Robinson doesn't really need it. I think just the turning point here will be who's the goal line guy. Yeah. And it's really hard to say right now. I'm betting on it being Robinson, but if it is Eckler, that like you said, that destroys every high value touch that Robinson gets, because we know it's goal line touches in targets. It's what you're looking for a guy to produce in fantasy. And if he's not getting those goal line touches, he's going to be absolutely buried. So hopefully we'll, like we said earlier, hopefully we'll get some information on this in the preseason. But yeah, I think that's really what the turning point will be, is who ends up being Kingsbury's preferred guy at the stripe.
Yeah, it's crucial. Worth noting too, though, that in Kingsbury's best year, 2021, with the Cardinals there, more than 2K yards from scrimmage and 20 total touchdowns from the duo of James Conner and Chase Edmonds. So there is a world where both these guys just kind of pay off their price tag, even if Eckler still is solid. we saw Connor put 15 touchdowns on the ground that year. So if that's the Brian Robinson role, if he takes the James Conner role and Eckler's not a threat there, it could be monstrous. I think he's one. I'm glad you called him out, especially given that's a player that I like. Like these type of strong points can sway me. I am not someone that I am a pretty stubborn guy overall. Just ask my wife. But ultimately, he's the type of player that I would ultimately be willing to relook at, and I think I need to relook at. So I'm good points all around. Our last running back that we're going to go over that we are not seeing eye to eye right now is Gus Edwards, my current highest drafted player in best ball right now. I am all in on him at his 121 running back 36 price tag. I love me some Gus Edwards. Coming off his career highs in games played, 17, starts 9, rushing yards 810, rushing touchdowns 13, the big point here. And of course, his total rushing attempts at 196. Those 13 touchdowns were third most among running backs, second most in the AFC. I think that is just a precursor to what we're going to see this year with the Chargers. I am super excited for this run game with Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. There's not a lot to be excited about with the offense overall that these guys run, but the running game is one of them. Their quotes and signing Gus, Joe Hortitz coming over from the Ravens, who clearly had some experience with Gus Edwards, says specifically with him, I've seen him come back from adversity, grind, be physical, continue to play the brand of football he's always played. He is the identity that we want to bring here. He's the bell cow. He's the goal line guy, the finisher. And I look at this roster, I'm not sure there's anybody really in his way to actually being a true bell cow, even if he has only had 189 as his career high carries. But in this Roman scheme, he's hit 5 yards per carry in 4 of 4 seasons in this offense. And Greg Roman, sure, pass game, 28th or lower in pass attempts in 9 of 10 seasons. 7 of 10 seasons, he was second to last or last in pass attempts. Doesn't make me very bullish on the receiving products here in Justin Herbert overall. But then you look at the flip side of that. It's because the run games have been so damn dominant. Top 10 in rush attempts every single year, 10 for 10. Top 3 and 7 of those 10 years. Rush yards, 10 for 10 in terms of total yards from the running backs. Top 3, again, 7 of 10 seasons for rushing yardage. He was number 1 in rushing yardage in 4 of his 10 seasons, calling plays. And then rushing touchdowns, 7 of 10 seasons, top 10. Top 5 in 5 of those 10 seasons. It is an elite run scheme. And this line ranked top 12 by PFF coming in, but they probably have a lot of room to vault up there with Joe Alt coming in, Rashawn Slater on the other side, maybe the best tackle duo if Alt pans out in the entire league here. So given this run heavy nature, and you look at, okay, who's he competing with for the best potential ground pie in the NFL? J.K. Dobbins. The success stories of Achilles backs is Donta Foreman 2 years later. And I mean, it's Donta Foreman. He hasn't really done that much. And that's the success story. So I'm not ready. As much I hope the best for J.K. Dobbins. I love the player. You're, of course, rooting for the guy. But I'm not sitting here buying him at all with that Achilles injury, given the track record. Kamani Vidal, okay, yeah, I'll draft him, especially if I don't get Gus Edwards. I am intrigued to see how it plays because I do think this is such a valuable situation. But we're talking about a round 6 running back. We haven't even seen a single positive blurb yet in all of this offseason camp with Gus Edwards resting a shoulder injury. How have we not seen anything about Kamani Vidal yet? Maybe the beat writer's just garbage, or maybe the guy just isn't standing out at all. So I see a guy in Gus seeing 60 to 65% of the work in an elite rushing scheme behind a top 12 at minimum offensive line in the league, a proven touchdown scorer. I think there's upside for 1,000 yards on the ground and 12 to 15 plus touchdowns. Because yes, I get it's not like the Ravens attack that was generating all those opportunities, but in all of Jim Harbaugh's years and 4 of those 5 seasons, they were top 11 in total points scored, and a ton of those did come on the ground. So the only risk to me is if they trade for a Khalil Herbert, a Dameon Pierce, maybe they sign Samaje Perine. There is some risk that somebody else could be brought in here. And yeah, that would really suck for Gus Edwards and all the stock I have in him. But if this backfield remains as it is currently constructed, again, Vidal would have to significantly outperform what typical round 6 rookies do. And could he? Maybe. I just love the bet on Gus Edwards, as hideous as it is, 120 for 15-ish touchdowns. It reminds me, and this is going to probably sound a little ridiculous because there's such different players and it's such different types of schemes, but it kind of reminds me of the Raheem Mostert situation last year where he was going 120-ish and ends up scoring 18 touchdowns. Again, I know that there's such different players, But it's, to me, a great run scheme. That it's different style of run scheme, yes, but great run schemes, good touchdown scores, and very little competition for that goal line goal. In fact, I'd say Mostert faced much more grave competition between Achane and Jeff Wilson last year. So I think there's a lot of unsexy upside to Gus Edwards, and I think he could end up really, really outproducing this 120 price tag.
There's an outcome where he does, but just kind of thinking about like the path to success for Gus Edwards, it's him consolidating the rushing work and scoring a bunch of touchdowns. And the first question I have is he good enough to consolidate the rushing work? Like I like you can diss like the Kamani Vidal and J.K. Dobbins all you want, and I have personally, like I think Vidal is being overdrafted, and Dobbins, like you said, more likely than not, just a dud after 2 massive injuries in the last 3 years. But I mean, at the end of the day, we've seen just total zeros and total nobodies get rushing work in the NFL because the top running back just simply isn't like someone who's talented enough or profiles to consolidate all the touches and be a bell cow. And I guess the reports about him like being the bell cow back coming out of the front office is, I think it is also partially a result of I don't agree with it, and I think it's partially a result of me having a fundamentally different understanding of what a bell cow back is, because Edwards is a total zero in the receiving game. He was, last season was his career best in terms of his receiving production, and it was, I think, 12 receptions for 180 yards, like, and it was by far his like best season in his career. So bell cow back isn't something that works in my mind with the name Gus Edwards, just because he doesn't offer anything in terms of a receiving output. And then moving on to the touchdowns, like I understand he will probably handle the majority of the looks at the goal line, but I don't know if this offense is good enough to provide him with the opportunities to do so. That's just like, it's not something you can debate statistically. It's just kind of how you fundamentally feel about the quality of this Chargers offense. I'm not entirely sure if they will provide him with the opportunity to have that double-digit touchdown season. And then kind of like looking back at last year, we had an example of most of these things breaking right for Gus Edwards. Like you hope for him to have a bunch of touchdowns and consolidate the rushing work. He didn't really consolidate a ton of the rushing work. He like handled, I think it was 40% of the team's rush attempts, but that considers like Lamar Jackson handling a bunch of the work. But it was still 200 touches, combined receptions and rush attempts. I don't really think there's a ton of room for improvement there. Like he will definitely see more. But like what's the ceiling? Like 230 rush attempts for Gus Edwards. So, but like what I was kind of getting to, we've seen kind of the positive outlook play out last season. He got a bunch of looks at the goal line. He got 13 touchdowns and he got 200 rush attempts. So he got a bunch of work and got the goal line work. And he was still the RB 32 in points per game last season. So I just don't see, like, even if things break right, like I've continually said, consolidating the rushing work and getting goal line looks, like we've seen those things happen for him to a degree, and he's still the RB 32. And then one other thing that I want to note, like just how dependent he is, given his lack of usage as a receiver, how dependent he is on finding the goal line or finding the end zone. Gus Edwards, in games where he did not find the end zone, his season high in games where he did not find the end zone was 6.9 PPR points. He never even cracked double digits in PPR points in games where he did not find the end zone. So that's just concerning, just because fundamentally I just don't, like, to the level that the Ravens provided him with opportunities to score, I just don't think that the Chargers will approach that. I mean, it was one of the best offenses in the league last year, and they provided him with ample opportunities to score. And I don't know if the Chargers will do that. I'm hesitant on that outcome in terms of just having the opportunity to score 10 plus touchdowns. And like I said, 6.9 PPR points in games where he did not, or maximum of 6.9 PPR points in games where he did not find the end zone. So I don't know. It's just, it seems like we had a lot of these positive aspects play out last year, and it was still a pretty pedestrian season. And I understand the picture that, like, the picture you're painting for where it works out. I am not that artist behind that picture, though.
I'll keep painting my Picasso then here with Gus Edwards. I come to the fact that I totally agree with you in the sense that he requires consolidated rushing work, and in most offenses, will Gus Edwards deserve the consolidated rushing workload? No. I think it's probably 28 of the offenses in the NFL I could point at and say, yeah, Gus Edwards should probably lead this backfield, maybe less than that. And yet the Chargers are the one that are at the top of that list because Achilles, J.K. Dobbins, and Kamani Vidal, round 6 rookie. I think the run game is always going to be great in a Greg Roman scheme. And even if Gus Edwards isn't incredible, again, 5 yards per carry every single year he's been with Greg Roman. If he gets 230 carries like you mentioned, if he averages what he's always averaging in a Greg Roman scheme, we're looking at 1,200-ish yards. That would certainly balance out that touchdown dependency just a little bit here at minimum. And I know the touchdown opportunities probably won't be quite as high, but I just want to reemphasize the fact that, again, all of Jim Harbaugh's years with Greg Roman, top 11 in points. And Greg Roman himself, top 12 in 7 of 10 years in touchdowns total with those Ravens. He had that historic most points in the NFL ever season. And that was crazy. That was Lamar Jackson. But what if Justin Herbert does put it all together? I'd feel a little bit less optimistic if it wasn't Herbert, a quarterback. I believe in the arm talent. But with this good line, with Harbaugh, this identity, I just see 250-ish carries. I see a very efficient runner in a scheme that he's thrived. And I think the touchdown opportunities are being discounted because everyone thinks of it as just this gross run-heavy attack. But again, top 12 in 7 of 10 years in total touchdowns as an offense. It might not be 18 touchdowns, but I do think there's upside for 12, 13, and 1,000-plus rush yards. And we're talking, again, pick 120 right now. I don't see much in that range that could truly lead a backfield that promises to be one of the best in the NFL. I love it. I cannot get enough of Gus Edwards. I know it sounds so ugly, and there's so many reasons to be against it. But I'm in. I'm all the way in, clearly.
And yeah, it's not like a full fade type of deal for me, but I don't know, like just the total 0 as a pass catcher, and like
I'll say this though, total 0. I get it in terms of he's never really been used. The 2 seasons he had more than 10 targets, which now we're hyping up seasons with at least 10 targets. I know how pathetic that is. But he averaged 14.3 and 15 yards per reception in those 2 years. So is it a matter of inability or just a lack of usage? I get it. If he was so good, he'd be used more often. But the few opportunities, the few times he's had a chance, that's not bad. Yards per reception, 14.5 and 15. But he's had some flashes on screens. I don't know. I think there's a little bit of an untapped ceiling here.
at that small of a sample size, it's completely skewed by, like, I just anecdotally remember him just ripping off 1 yard. Or one reception, and it was like 25 yards. And I was like, oh, that's got to be Gus Edwards' longest reception of his career. And I would not be shocked if it was. Like the yards per reception stuff, like very big time skewed by that small sample size. But yeah, I think it just comes down to you kind of fundamentally believe to a larger degree that Gus Edwards is, or the Chargers offense will provide more scoring opportunities than I do. And like you said, like it's historically speaking, Roman has been able to do that. So it could end up playing out in Gus Edwards' favor. I don't know.
I think he works great too in, like, if you're doing a 0 RB build and you've loaded up on receivers, which you probably should be either hero or 0 running back, at least in these best ball drafts, it is a guy that's going to get in your lineup at minimum 6 to 7 times when he scores that touchdown. He's going to be there. He's going to have at least 10 to 12 points, and then some weeks where he scores 2 and he's getting you 18 to 20. I think that's the floor. And at 120 on a 0 running back build, I think it's worth considering. So we shall see. That's enough Gus Edwards talk for all of your afternoons. Great to see you, Joe. Thank you for tuning in. A phenomenal account over there at the FF Analyst. Over 100K, I believe, on Instagram. one of the best follows you can have out there. So thanks for tuning in, Joe. Appreciate it. Great to see you, Ian, Mr. Nick. Good to see you, brother. Hope all is well on this lovely, lovely Monday afternoon. Gabe, yes, great question that I am excited to dive in on in just a second. But I just want to say what's up to Mitch. What's up to Danny Kolk. Great legends here coming in on the chat. Get all your questions on in, guys, as we draft here. The rest of the time is dedicated to your questions and just the draft in general, our takes as we go. So we have what pick here does it look like? The 7th, what we always get. So it would appear. The dreaded 7th, 7 and 9. I think that's what I get. I'm going to rerun my drafts in Dubner's tracker. I bet you I'm in the 7 to 10 range in 65% at minimum. Maybe like 80% of 190 drafts right now. It's ridiculous. But hey,
yeah, I'm in that range at a concerning rate as well. It is it is bad. I think I texted you the other day. I have 0 shares of Jamar Chase on Underdog because I've gotten the 4th pick twice, and both times. Oh, so Amon-Ra falls to us here at 7. I'd prefer to do that.
Do it. Yeah. As much as I love that, I've loved, like, I don't even mean to complain because I really do like the hero running back builds with Bijan, with Breece. And what I've been doing is more so Breece lately, just because I did do it's similar to you. I think we've got a lot of Bijan teams going and cooking already. So I want to build those out with Breece, given the upside. He has 500 yards in his last 3 games, 40 points, 29 points, 25, and all that with Zach Wilson and oh God, who were the Trevor Siemian? Like, it was just the quarterback carousel from hell. And he was just doing these nasty, nasty things. So you give him Aaron Rodgers, goes from the 29th scoring offense to probably a top 10 one. I feel like every week I flip on like Breece versus Bijan. I can make the case for either. Part of me wants to just go back to Breece higher now because we've already seen the legendary upside in a horrible offense. Like Bijan, we just haven't really fully seen it quite yet. I don't mean to debate this every single time we draft, but that's what happens when you have the 7th pick. We got Amon-Ra either way, which I'm very excited to see. Who went above him that should – Garrett Wilson going at 6.
Yeah,
okay.
Someone with a big player stand on Garrett Wilson there.
It is understandable, too, a 30% target share from Rodgers as we preach Breece here. I can see the case for Garrett, but I just could never pass on Amon-Ra myself there. So Gabe, we're going to make this pick here. After Amon-Ra, we're up in 2. And then I hope you're still with us. If not, maybe you're catching the replay. But I think the Miami backfield is a super important one. Maybe the most exciting backfield in the NFL. So it's definitely a great one to dive into. So we're going to hit that in just a sec. But we're on the clock here. What do you think? Do we go for the correlation with like an Ayuk Debo or?
Yeah, I've got Ayuk queued up here.
Hopefully it doesn't get traded away to the Steelers and ruin this team.
That would be awesome.
I'm cool with Ayuk, though. He's already talked about wanting to come back. And if you're going him versus Debo, I think you got to go Ayuk. But, man, you can see it. If Ayuk did get traded, like, Debo would probably become a early second, maybe, like, fringe first. Like, why would Drake London go over Debo if Ayuk's gone? You know?
He wouldn't.
He wouldn't deserve
Ricky
to.
Pearsall would be where would Ricky Pearsall go if
that's a great question.
If Ayuk gets traded, like the 6th rounds, like 7th rounds.
Yeah, because especially in that range where it's like Christian Watson and like JSN become your number one options.
All those rookies are piled up.
I'd rather have him than JSN if Ayuk is removed from the equation. That's why I've been taking him a lot, especially on DraftKings where he goes like 160. It's insane. But I've started to take him a lot more in 139 because, again, maybe this would be a good topic for next week or whenever we're live again, is like over the next summer, like what are our predictions for who could just skyrocket? Because there's maybe 5 players total, in my opinion, that like really could just go up 40 spots between now and the end of summer. And Pearsall is certainly one of them. Like, you know, if no one's traded, then you're sitting there waiting all year for someone to get hurt. And it's always an annoying spot to be in. But even then, like, one of those guys goes down at any point and boom, he's going. The other part of that equation too is George Kittle, you know, going in round 6. Like he would belong in right around Mark Andrews, you know, that round 4 or 5 turn. And Gabe, we still have not got to your Miami question. So let's talk about this one. Because Devon Achane goes right there. Good spark to talk about this. I wrote about it. So if you're intrigued on more on him, more in depth than what we can do right here, I have a full just breakdown on only Devon Achane. I've gotten so many questions on him. I wrote a whole article about what 6 running backs do I think are worth round 1 to 2 consideration in best ball, and he was clearly one of them. He was the final guy there. But to me, his upside is only trumped by Christian McCaffrey. And in terms of, you look at the efficiency metrics, yards per attempt, yards per touch, yards after contact, fantasy points over expected, you could just rifle off all of them, and he's number one. You just never, it's historic level efficiency that we've never seen. And you put on the tape and you watch him and you see it, the way he knifes through defenses, the way once he gets a tiny crease, he is gone. And we're about to pick. So I'll keep my Devon Achane rant going in just a sec. Who are some guys that we have queued up here in round 3?
I've got Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell type of deal.
I love Cooper Kupp here. I
think
that's
he's fine with me.
Smash pick here.
He's
my favorite round.
No clear option at running back.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to. That 3 receiver build gives us a lot of flexibility. It's the best way to start. I'm thinking right now too. Maybe we look at if Kelsey falls back to us. I've started to see Mahomes fall in round 5 if the Kelsey team goes. So that's just something to consider. But again, Achane, just that historic level of efficiency in such a great run scheme. Top 3 in yards and number 1 in total touchdowns, and it's so good at using his running backs in the screen game. And then you get the reports. Achane's running, with the receivers in camp, and he's dusting corners in routes that just are, it's the way he cuts, the way he's catching contested balls, looks like he's the number 3 receiver out there, to the point that Wingfield, one of my favorite covers of the Dolphins, said this could be Christian McCaffrey in terms of usage and versatility. And I know, again, we already talked about who somebody else earlier was the next Christian McCaffrey. Saquon Barkley was supposed to be him, the Eagles. So I get it. There's no other Christian McCaffrey, but Achane, again, is just so crazy with the touches you get. I know Mostert's going to be involved, but he only needs, if you give him 55% of the work, my God, he was at about 40% of the work. I think he was 44th in total touches and then 5th in points per game. It's just, at his price, it's just it's a no-brainer to me. I absolutely love him. And then, of course, I do like taking Mostert and Jalen Wright as well, because if he does get hurt, we know that's the downside. He could go down. Well, we saw Mostert put up 18 touchdowns when Achane was in and out of the lineup. Jalen Wright, a 4-3 guy that maybe could be like a Achane clone in a way. I think Achane has the vision and the receiving ability, just is a different level. But if he's out and Wright gets 12 touches a game in that offense, it's just such a good scheme that I'm willing to take as many fire shots away. Achane in round 3, love it. Mostert in round 9, love it. Jalen Wright in particular is my highest owned Miami back and 3rd highest owned back in general. Love him in round 14. It's just a backfield I'm going to go all after. So, yeah, I know I ranted a bit, Mo, and we'll make our pick, and you can let me know what you think of this offense. But who's catching your eye here?
So I've got Pacheco queued up. I'm fine to go McBride here as well, but those
I do want to bump my Pacheco up, and I do. We texted about this. Why don't we go him? When it's, I hate to sound disparaging, but when the quote unquote casuals, when the people who haven't been drafting like psychos like us for the last 2 months come in and they see Pacheco, who goes round 5 in redraft, or round 2 rather in redraft, going in the round 4 or 5 range, he's going to start going in the mid round 3, kind of where Kyron Williams went there, maybe even earlier. So I don't want to be without him. I don't have a ton of him yet. I think he's in a great spot. He's the guy in my top 6 running back article that I said the honorable mention who's not going in round 2 or higher, but has a shot to be a true top 3, legendary upside type guy. I'm in on Pacheco there. And that's why I love the 3 receivers start, because it gives it to us. Mo, I've talked a lot. I've been rambling. So I was gushing about the backfield for Miami. Do you feel similarly, or do you want to hype up Pacheco? Whatever you want to address here.
So on the Miami backfield, from just what Mike McDaniel is able to provide for that offense as a whole, not even just the passing or the rushing attack, the passing game as well. Yeah, it's incredibly fertile fantasy offense, and you consistently see fantasy studs coming out of Miami. And with Achane, you have to have your Achane bags in best ball. If he stays healthy, you're probably I don't want to put an exact percentage on it, but you're going to get burned by Achane if you are fading him and he stays healthy.
He's the exact mold of someone that literally buries you. You couldn't win without him.
Yeah, there's only so many players who have shown an ability to quite literally score 50 fantasy points in a single week, and Devon Achane is one of them. So not having him in best ball, it's incredibly frightening. But I don't want to discount Raheem Mostert. And like there's the whole narrative of him being older but not having as much tread on his tires because he didn't see a lot of usage when he was over there in San Francisco. And it's true. He's got significantly fewer touches than anyone else in terms of anyone else similar to him in terms of when he was drafted and just overall age. So that is true. And they also just extended them. It was a smaller contract and it's only another extension for 1 year. And I'll keep going on this after we make our.
You want to pull up the queue here and we can kind of see what we're looking at. It does look like we got a fellow drafter watching the stream here too at the 12 spot. Z-Balls. Good to see you, brother. I like what you're doing so far. We can talk about your squad.
Richardson, I'm cool with James Cook. I know you like Ridley a lot.
I do like Ridley, but I know we go him a lot. I feel like we already dipped in the running back waters, though. So if you'd rather go Godwin instead of in Ridley, that's fine with me. But I feel like we should probably dip into the receiver waters first and then go.
Godwin or Pitts for me. We'll go Godwin.
We'll go Godwin, yeah. We'll see what happens with Pitts. Again, you know my thoughts on him.
I do.
And I'm glad you pulled up Richardson because he's going to be an interesting guy to talk about. I heard a great podcast with Ben Gretsch and Sean Siegel, the Stealing Bananas. He was the focus of their last podcast that I listened to, at least. And they might come up with some since then. But it was a great episode. And again, with Ridley, like I know we've taken a ton of him. And I hear some of these minds that are so much smarter than me. So it worries me. Pat Carrain, why would you draft Ridley? And some of these guys that have won the Millie. So it has me cooling off a little bit. And I really do like him. But I'm cool with Godwin, the slot role, the Cooper Kupp role. But no, I know you weren't finished quite yet. You were talking about Raheem Mostert.
It's not a fun pick. He's a 30-year-old running back. He's
20 touchdowns are pretty freaking fun.
So that's really the only part that makes it not fun is that he's old. Like that's the only part that makes it not fun. He's on the older side, but like I said, just sign him to an extension, like not a ton of money, but a demonstration of the front office and just Miami as a whole wanting to keep him a part of the offense. And I don't think it's crazy to say, like, I don't think it's great. It's not crazy to say at all. Devon Achane is not a running back who's going to consolidate a bunch of touches. We've kind of talked about that concept pretty extensively here on this show. Devon Achane, not the type to get a big workload. I mean, just in terms of like what he does as a running back and also just his size, he is not a bell cow running back. And I don't think anyone should reasonably have that expectation for him. So you're once again relying on ridiculous efficiency.
Addison goes. Yeah. Sorry.
So no worry. I've got Kittle queued up here. I think we can go.
Yeah, he makes a lot of sense with the San Fran.
Yep.
I love that pick. I think it's great.
So moving back to Achane, you need him to be ridiculously efficient once again and be once again really good at finding the end zone. And just given the scheme and what he brings as a player, it's very possible. But so I think you need him in best ball, but I understand when people have qualms about him in redraft, because just from a week to week perspective, like players who are in a committee backfield, which I expect this to be, and there's no guarantee that this isn't even a 3-headed backfield with potentially Jalen Wright seeing some work, probably not very much, but more of a contingent type of play, but not necessarily crazy to think he might get some touches. But you just from a week to week perspective, it's going to be pretty brutal to try and project. I mean, going up against an actually good defense, we saw Achane score 4.1 fantasy points against the Miami defense, and it's just there's no real way to put it other than like it just seems like if Mike McDaniel just like kind of feels like whipping out those creative like plays to get plays to get Achane the ball and like how the game script is shaking out, if he can afford to utilize those plays. And I understand like seeing increased usage as a passer, like we probably will see that. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be a volume guy. So on a week-to-week basis, it's just really tough to project. So it'll depend on where he shakes out for redraft ADP. But in best ball, you got to have him just because he can win a week any week. Redraft, I'm a little bit more hesitant because of that week-to-week variance, and obviously just there's a legitimate outcome where he's dust and injured for the whole season pretty early on. I mean, he dealt with 2 significant injuries. He had an AC joint sprain in the preseason and then an MCL sprain in week 5. I mean, he was pretty regularly banged up. So there's a lot of outcomes where he fails in redraft, and like you get to the playoffs and it's one of those weeks where he has a dud and it just costs you. It's harder for me in redraft, but you got to have him in best ball.
Yeah, I know we're about to make our picks, so I'll hold off on not necessarily a rebuttal, but there's one other stat I just want to toss out there on Achane that I find absolutely absurd to again highlight the upside. And I do think the receiving role could go up. But what do we got in the queue here?
I've got Ramondre and Najee here.
I like both those backs. I'm cool with either one of them. I think they're both great clicks right here.
I need more Ramondre, so
yeah, I don't have much of him, and I have a good amount of Najee. And if Warren makes it back on the next wave, he's still getting best in the backfield. Yeah, I like that. Are you looking at maybe JMO in the next round, or is that overkill with Amon-Ra? But that game,
I don't think so.
Yeah, like he could be a potential guy in the next round. Another back. I do think our build here, we're kind of looking towards a 3 QB, and I don't mind that because we got Kupp. Okay, Stafford very stackable late. Baker Mayfield. I've seen Mayfield, especially. I don't know what the Mike Evans drafter's done yet. I've seen him go 190s because nobody wants him if you're not stacking him. This is one where we can kind of push some of those pocket passes. I've seen Stafford. We took 170 in a draft. I saw him go 190 as well recently. So I think we could get kind of cute with some pushing. Seeing what falls. Jared Goff in a similar boat. I see him fall all the time as well. So I think a rotation, it's the unsexy pocket passes. I think that could lead to us talking about Anthony Richardson next, the opposite of that. Because I do want to mention him. He was someone we had queued up. But ultimately, 3 Goff, Stafford, and Baker build that, and all 3 are stacked. Like, I think we're getting 20 out of our QB more weeks than we're not. And there goes JMO. So we won't be getting him on our next Z-Balls. The man watching the stream sniping us over there. Maybe we got to stop talking until we'll just go dead silent until pick 12 goes. Fun. No, he's building out a quality. I love the Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison starts. I've done that a ton, and I think it's a huge upside play for sure. So be interested to see what he does at running back with only Mixon so far, but that's some of the best teams. All right, we're up, and then we can get back. Oh, I have that DeVonta Smith stat I want to share too. So
I've got Cortland Sutton queued up here. There's not a lot of quarterbacks in this range that makes sense. We could go Bowers and just be done with tight ends.
I hate that. Any running back still? Zach Moss?
Huh?
Zach Moss?
We're about to time out. I'm going Bowers.
Yeah, that's fine. I like.
Oh, we got
Sutton.
It timed out. I had him at the top of the queue.
The timeout on the sticks. Your first mistake.
I was moving up Bowers. I'm fine with the Sutton pick. I don't know why you don't like him. It's like the easiest projectable volume guy. You set yourself up for backdoor stacks if you need it, which we will in this build. He's gonna see 100 targets, and you don't get that very often in the 90s in these drafts with how the wide receivers fly off the board. So I don't know. It's not a super fun pick. Like he sun run touchdowns last year. It's like, I don't know. It's the easiest projectable volume in terms of with the range of the draft that he goes.
Maybe, I guess, especially with Judy Glenn. And I know in our one of our first streams we did this offseason, back when we were doing the big board drafts, and we had our undervalued picks. Sutton was one of mine. He was going 120 or so in that time though. And if I'm attacking and backdooring the Broncos, I'd rather go with the Mims or Franklin, the exciting young talents. I don't see him sun running touchdowns again. Maybe he does become that go-to guy for Bo Nix, but if I'm looking for a receiver in this range, it's typically Lockett. I much prefer him. I don't know. Sutton it feels so boring to me.
So I'm thinking running back here. We've got Pollard, Brian Robinson, Benson, Javonte, IJ, really anyone we want here.
Yeah, I don't mind going Robinson. We talked about him. You kind of sold me on him. I wouldn't hate Corum, to stack with.
He just went.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, he was gone.
So maybe Benson, if he makes his way back to us, could kind of correlate. Although I imagine Z-Balls with the Carolina thing going on, or not Carolina, the Arizona thing going on there. I don't think we'll get Benson on the way back, but he's intriguing. I would say, though, so I guess, again, I don't think the argument outright is wrong for Sutton in general. I think he's just a 2 rounds overpriced, like Mostert, Connor, Zach Moss. Like, this is where those running backs are just like, I don't get why these guys are going here. And I know we already have Ramondre and Pacheco, so we're already like pretty good at the position. But like, one thing Kareem talked about the strategy too, is like, I don't mind. We have Pacheco, Mondre. Let's say we did go Connor or Moss there, and then we take Brian Robinson even still here. We've got our 4 running backs. We could just go hyper fragile at that point. Like, these are the type of running backs you could build hyper fragile with 3 years ago that you'd have to spend round 2 through 5 capital on. But we'd have a 3 receiver start, a potential elite tight end in Kittle. Like, I think we should probably look at Purdy on this round as well.
I was gonna auto click Purdy.
Yeah, I think that he makes perfect sense. With what we're building out here, that could be one of our 3 stacks, our 3 QBs. I really do love like the receivers we chose to build with here. Again, I know it doesn't lead itself to the rushing quarterback upside, but a Purdy, again, and 2 more of Stafford, Baker, or Goff is awesome. And the fact that they're like all just kind of the same guy is like, let's just play whoever falls the most game. But again, I love that structure. Like if we had gone a Mostert, a Connor to balance out Cooper Kupp, a Zach Moss, the guy I typically target there. I don't know. Like, all of that just feels so much higher range of outcomes than Cortland Sutton. I don't know. It just
I wanted to go tight end there. I was moving. I thought I dropped him on the top of the queue in time, Bowers, but I obviously did not. It is what it is. Like, I don't think Cortland Sutton's an awful pick. I understand what you're saying. Like, just structurally, yeah, it makes sense. I just in a vacuum, I don't think Cortland Sutton is a god awful pick. And like we've kind of talked about reliance on touchdowns. He was the king of that at wide receiver last year, but with Jerry Jeudy gone, it's just more opportunity for him to earn targets. And just with how quickly wide receiver dries up and what kinds of opportunity I think Cortland Sutton will have, it's easy to kind of just slot him in there as your 5th wide receiver. Like, when he does end up hitting with those touchdown weeks, those splash plays, he'll hit your lineup. But it's going to be consistent looks. Who's really going to be taking them away? I mean, maybe you can convince yourself of the shower narrative with Troy Franklin and Knicks, but I think he is by far the most talented receiver in this offense.
Yeah, I guess I'm probably a little too high on Mims myself rebounding, given that he didn't do much on a fair amount of routes. But we've seen Peyton like just not use rookies at all, and then those guys go off. Mark Ingram at a different position, but we've seen it with rookie receivers too. And then Sutton, if anyone's going to be a Mike Thomas and catch 95 to 100 something balls, it could be Sutton. Yeah, I don't want to keep harping on it and hating on the point. I just think it builds the build with a running back there. We might not touch the position the rest of the draft, maybe one more rookie upside guy. All right, here we go. What are we looking at?
We can do Goff here, or we can take a swing at running back like Chase Brown. There's not many appealing tight ends to me here, so.
I like Chase Brown. When I don't take Moss, I really like to leave every draft with at least one Bengals back. We now risk the Gibbs guy or the Laporta guy sniping us here on Goff, but I've seen Goff go to 150. So we'll see. In the fact that we again have Stafford and have Mayfield as potential partners, if we didn't have those other stacks possibly set up, I'd say Goff makes the most sense here. I really do like Goff in general at his price right now, but we've got some options, I think. So I think it's fine to push him and take an upside swing here at Chase Brown. And now it makes me feel less sad about missing out on Zach Moss here.
Don't discount the backdoor Denver stuff I've set us up for here. I mean,
yeah, we've got a Bengal now. You know that I like that game. There goes Goff. I think Z-Balls has he goes double tap. We're getting the Drake London, getting the Sam Laporta. Not a horrible strategy. It might be is it too much capital? Some might ask, but it's all correlated. It's all correlated to all the studies that Leone's doing on, three. We talked about it all last week on our QB strategy show. If you guys didn't see it, but 2 QB stacked had been optimal for many years, and then in particular in playoffs, 3 stacked quarterbacks was a sneaky big edge. And Z-Balls goes and pulls that off here, a nice tap, and that's what I think we're looking at as a 3 QB stacked build. No more with Goff, unfortunately. But I'm happy to get Chase Brown where we got him for sure. So
I've got we could go Pearsall here.
Yeah, I'd love it.
Works with me.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Ayuk leaving would be horrible for us, but now we kind of cover that, and if Debo has his injury, every other plan with Debo, he's been the every other year. He had a great year last year. He's due for a down, injury-ridden year, according to history. It's literally been every other year. Should I make my decisions on that? No, but hey, if history repeats itself, Debo will have an injury at some point, and we'll have the top 3 guys with Kittle as well. I
think that's sound logic, though. The every other year, I think that's just you can't really argue with it. It's facts are facts. He performs well every other year. The reasoning behind it, who cares? It's facts are facts. Debo Samuel, it's the year. He, especially with definitely Ayuk being a Commander. I mean, he's watching Commanders tape in his free time. I mean, I don't know if you saw that, but I mean, it's things are shaping up. Brandon Ayuk, Commander, Debo Samuel, 1-2 turn pick, Ricky Pearsall, screaming up draft boards. I really think we've kind of cracked the code here, and we've covered all the bases.
We've covered the bases because, do I prefer Ayuk in the 49ers scheme? Of course I do, but it was only 107 targets last year. Like, if he goes back with his college quarterback here, becomes the number 1 for the Commanders, and now we have Pearsall and Kittle screaming up the board, and then Debo goes down too because it's the every other year. Whew, this team would be absolutely cooking. That's the crazy thing too, is like all those injuries could happen. It's like, well, then of course Purdy's going to suck and this offense would blow. I have faith that Shanahan could still put up top 5 points per game, even with maybe not. Maybe that's crazy to think without Debo and Ayuk, this offense could still hum. But I don't know. It's creative. Like he gets it done. McCaffrey still, like, we'd see what happens. All right, who are we looking at here?
I've got Stafford queued up here. I've got Stafford. He's right on ADP.
No one's gonna take it. Is Polk gone?
Yeah, Polk's gone.
Long gone. Burton though gets us that the Bengals. We're going with that Bengals kind of stack here. I say push Stafford and go Burton.
All right.
You have a weird draft technique, right? You could just click
that was that. I don't know what I was doing there. That was just weird. I don't know what that was.
Making me sweat over here.
That was just a fail to compute about what was going on there. That I agree. That was bad. Bad form there.
I think someone we could have looked at is what has the Puka drafter done at quarterback. We're about to find out. Because that does change, how willing you should be to let Stafford fall. So maybe the Puka guy ends up sniping him here. That's one of the risks. But if he doesn't, that's another one where you could play do we push him again? Probably not worth the risk. But I do think Burton's a guy, again, we know how rookies always come up big. It's 5 for 5 or 4 for 4 right now in terms of best ball, Mania finals, where a rookie has hit and gone to the lineup. A late season breakout. So these are the type of profiles I like to invest in. There goes Stafford to the Puka guy. We probably are looking at a Bo Nix, Baker Mayfield next round, Bo Nix to end the draft. I'm cool with it though. I like the backdoor Bo Nix. I don't have a lot of it. I've been doing so much Drake May with the backdoors that I'm okay trying out some more. Maybe Sutton was the blessing in disguise of this draft.
So I'm fine to go Baker here just to lock it down. And then
what's the Evans guy? What's the Evans team look like? I guess we are getting a little cute if we push him again. But
I'm not trying to that's the last
you won't
one
even show me what the Evans team has, because if he's got 2 or 3 quarterbacks already.
The Evans team has 1 quarterback.
Yeah, I think we go for Baker then. Yeah, because he'll probably snipe Baker if not. And we do want 3 QBs correlated.
We're leaving ourselves, very minimal outs to stacked quarterbacks if we do not go, if we do not go Baker there. So
I do want to return back to Anthony Richardson, because I thought in our player debate, I was kind of surprised that you didn't have Richardson on our list, because I'm lower on Richardson than most people right now this year. So whether you're lower as well with me. Now, I guess you can't really start a Richardson conversation without being like, could the guy run for 20 touchdowns, break fantasy, and be like the second coming of Jesus? Maybe. Yeah, like that certainly is in the realm of outcomes for Anthony Richardson. But, man, I'm worried. Like, you can't play the injury narrative, I guess, but, like, he got the Russian quarterbacks. We've seen it, a higher injury rate with that situation, and maybe it was just bad luck, and that certainly could be out, but that's got to scare you at least a little bit. And even if not, the Ben Gretsch pod I was referencing earlier today that I listened to, they talked a lot about him and Sean Siegel. The games where Richardson did play, the first game was like crazy, 70% pass rate, explosive, like 70 total plays. And then in his other few, it's small sample size, but they were extremely, extremely run heavy, running the ball more than they were throwing. Even in overtime games, like a 70, 80 play game, they ran it like 45 times. And yeah, sure, we like the rushing upside for the quarterback, but they were handing it to Zach Moss like 30-something times that game. And in a run-heavy offense, you typically get less plays. It's a slower game where the clock is just running and running and running. And so you mix in those concerns, the low passing ceiling possibly, the injury concerns, and him going now about a round earlier than Stroud, who might throw for 4,950 touchdowns. I don't know. I'm just not in on Richardson, and I guess he's similar to Achane in that sense that, like, I do want a little bit of him. I mean, I want a lot of Achane, so I guess I shouldn't compare those two. I love Achane. But there is the world where, like, Richardson just destroys you. And I know we got to pick. So it's like a guy to want for the finals. But, yeah, what are we looking at?
I've got Irving and Otten queued up to
I like
Bucks.
probably Otten. We need a tight end 2 here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we are in pretty desperate need of a second tight end.
Yeah, there's plenty of decent running backs late. And it looks like we're getting to that pocket. Like, I see Henry's gone. I see Fant just went. My boy John, who's probably still out there, as we know.
He is definitely out there.
Yeah.
No need to sweat Jonnu being gone in the 15th round. We're not quite into Jonnu territory just yet.
So yeah, there's definitely still some tight ends I like. I do like Bucky Irving if he makes it around to us, but we have good running backs already. He's certainly more of a luxury at this point. He fits what we're doing, though. We have 2 pretty solid guys, like firmly entrenched guys. And then we get a nice rookie. He goes, sadly.
From Mr.
Do you think Otten would have made it back to us? Like, do people draft naked Otten?
Yeah.
Hope not.
It's like the second most routes of any quarterback out there.
Yeah.
Or
That's
any
true.
tight end out there.
All right. Who's in the? Why don't you show me the queue? Let's see who we got. Maybe we can.
McMillan, Elijah Mitchell. And we could do a tight end.
I like the Elijah Mitchell call. I don't have a lot of him, and we're building out this 49ers squad. Like, even if it's only in that week 17.
This is like our last running back, though. Yeah, that's fine.
I like Mitchell. Yeah, snag him.
And then 2 more picks. We'll have to go 1 to Bo Nix, and then we'll have to decide if we want to go. Well, I mean, we might not even be able to make the decision. McMillan.
So what do we have right now? What's our roster construction? 2.
We've got 2-5-7-2 right now.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to get 1 more with Nix, and then we can decide. I feel like I don't love 2 tight ends with Kittle, but like it's fine. I think an 8th wide receiver probably ahead of whatever tight end is going to be there for us.
It depends. If our boy Jonnu, which I know doesn't fit our team, but like if he falls, I love Jonnu enough that like that would be an ADP value I'd want to scoop. I love Javon Baker. I think a Khalif Raymond play might make some sense here to correlate with the 49ers Lions thing we're building out. It gives you a little cushion if anything ever happened to Amon-Ra. And yeah, Z-Balls, we'll definitely, once this draft wraps up, we'll review both our teams that you decided to watch the stream while drafting. I love it. I appreciate that. And I like what you're doing so far. So we will definitely review your squad after we wrap up here. Please don't snipe us on Bo Nix. He wouldn't fit your build at all.
Oh, don't worry. We already got sniped. Like a complete symptom of not paying as close of attention to the draft board because I'm doing the Q and stuff. Just completely missed a dude doing a full-on late stack with the Broncos.
Does he have Mims and Franklin?
Yeah. So we're kind of screwed. At quarterback, we can just take a Fields, I guess, in the last round, but one more wide receiver here. We need Raymond. Yeah, let's just do Raymond. Yeah,
that's do Raymond. Correlate with our guy.
Yeah.
Even though we can get him in the last round, then we can game plan what we want to do. I mean, when you have Purdy, like I do probably want 3 QBs, and so yeah, I guess got a little greedy with Stafford, thinking that Bo Nix was gonna definitely make it back to us. But I mean, Purdy, Baker, like if we end up with 2 QBs, we end up with 2 QBs. An unstacked car feels really gross.
I have no interest in that.
I don't either. Only for the fact though of like sheer advancement. Like, so is there anybody we'd be correlated with here? JJ, we have no weapons.
Oh, sorry. We've got JJ, nothing. Like the only naked one here that makes sense is Fields. Like
but all these reports in terms of like really beating them out right now.
It's horrible. Yeah, I guess this is probably just a awful 2 QB team, and not awful, but like just would prefer it to be 3 quarterbacks, but it is not.
I know naked car isn't great, but again, like the new 49ers scheme. The last few games of the year, like he finally got healthy and was like on pace for like 40 touchdowns. Like, I don't know. In terms of like the sheer just way to advance, I know it's unstacked and makes very little sense, but like for guaranteed points, he's going to get our lineup a few weeks. And then he has like a really soft playoff schedule with a few dome games in there. Like, and he is the type of like unstacked quarterback where it's like, is it going to Olave and Shaheed most of the time? But there's games he has like 3 touchdowns and like, one goes to Juwan Johnson, one goes to Taysom Hill, and then like a fullback catches it. And like Carr has 25 points and he doesn't really bring much with him. I don't know. Like, I feel like our need is definitely a QB right now. And Fields is kind of, I don't know. I'm cool with Fields, but I also think there's a case for like the points of Carr helping push us over the edge. I don't know.
You've convinced me of a naked Carr. I'm fine with it. Would prefer to have any sort of stack there, but it is what it is. You can't really do anything about it.
What we could have looked into there is Juwan Johnson over Khalif. Yeah. If we had gone Juwan over Khalif and then Derek Carr at the end there, like it set up the stack for us, that would have been the play.
Yeah. It is what it is. All right, so let's hop in and review this team then.
Yeah, we'll review our squad. We'll review Z-Ball's squad. Thanks again for tuning in. Anybody else that has any questions? I had 250 of you here. Thanks again so much. Love to see it on another Monday, another solid crowd. The way it keeps growing is those thumbs ups, those likes, those shares, the retweets, all that good stuff. It really, really does help us out. I swear Thaddeus has a burner, by the way, saying get your guys here on Real Fat. It's either Thaddeus or the Thaddeus fan club there with the get your guys. I totally agree with the get your guys. Man, I do wish instead of Raymond, we took Juwan and Derek Carr and backdoored that. And I've done that in a lot of drafts. I wish I didn't even think to like bring it up. Whatever. You live and you learn. Raymond fits our build. Now we have naked Carr.
Nice.
Nice naked car, baby. Should we do the 12 squad first? Get Z-Balls his review, and then we'll
sure.
talk about ours.
Let's get through it. Pretty standard. 1-2 turn start. Not anything crazy there. Doing the London thing. Absolutely robbed Peter Underzet of his Puka Marvin Harrison, and then getting a little frisky with things at the 3-4, grabbing Christian Kirk a little bit ahead of ADP, but it's not anything crazy. I've done that before to catch up on wide receiver stuff, and I like this is where I don't mind grabbing Sam Laporta. Yes. I think like at the back end of the third round, and obviously he does it at the 401 here. That's where you do it. Anything else to add on these first 4 picks?
No, I think structurally it makes sense with wide receiver firepower, such a focus in these best ball drafts. Like, I think he followed the right structure going those 3. And I do love an elite tight end, whether you follow up with Laporta, Kelsey. I think it's a great start. My question would be like, I guess I'm not a huge Kirk guy. I know you are. But I personally, whether it's Cooper or Pickens who went, Pickens really fell in this draft. So maybe you did make the right call there, at least in terms of this crowd. But I personally prefer Pickens or Cooper there over Christian Kirk. I think I even prefer Terry, assuming IU just get traded there. So maybe you were trying to set up a Jags thing, and I totally get that. They're more stackable. It makes sense. But Kirk, I love the receiver focus. I think there weren't a ton of great options to keep building out the 3 receiver build. So like instead of Kirk, it would have been one of those 2 guys I shouted out. Or I think you kind of have to get a receiver though. So if Kirk's your taste there and that's your preference, that's what you go with. So structurally sound, build you that flexibility, and now you can kind of move through there. So then we get Mixon Javonte Benson as the running back room. I love Mixon. I think it's a great price tag on him. I think he can be your running back 1. You can be fine with it. And you guys know I love Ridley at this point, even though a lot of smart people don't. Ridley correlates with Christian Kirk. I think Ridley, the success against man and zone were great. The press was the issue, and now he's going to get moved around reportedly. I think that's getting overlooked and or underappreciated, whatever the world would be. So, I really like Ridley there. And I like Mixon there. So I thought that was solid. But I do worry about – I'm not a Javonte guy myself. What do you think of Javonte? It is a backfield where Sean Payton has generated tons of expected points for his running backs. I just worry Estime could take early down. Jaleel could take receiving. If Javonte, this historic prospect that was amazing, does return to form, then he's the clear-cut best back here. No questions asked. He's coming off a ton of touches. But I worry about Javonte. I don't know. He's not a guy I find myself clicking a lot.
It's he's coming off that multi-ligament. I think it was ACL, MCL. So it shouldn't have come as a shock to people that he was inefficient and not very productive last year. And now we're moving into year 2. And I think that while this backfield is ambiguous to a degree, you mentioned how valuable Sean Payton backfields have been. And I think he's by far the best talent in this backfield. So I think you can kind of tell what I'm getting at here. I've slowly but surely convinced myself of Javonte more and more, just because I'm willing to bet on the talent and every historical example, not every obviously, but like of the success stories, it's that year 2 comeback from the multi-ligament ACL or just knee ligament tear. So I think at a price of in pass pick 100, I mean, I don't know why not. It's not gonna be a great offense, but RB2 status very much attainable. I think. I don't think it's an impossible task for him to fend off Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and company. So I don't know. I think he's gonna have the leeway as the 1A, getting the majority of the touches early. And it's really just a bet on whether or not he's returned to form. And his struggles last year prevented him from coming up draft boards. And I don't remember what his ADP was last year, but I think he's actually fallen from what he was last year. So probably fallen. Yeah. So I'm willing to take the bet again, just because it's that second year, and like all information out there points to the second year being the time that these guys bounce back from those type of injuries, and he's still young. So I at a price of past pick 100, I think he's fine.
Yeah, I know, because I'm a believer in Peyton, and I'm a believer in what Javonte was pre-injury. So maybe I do need to start mixing him in more. If you have a ton of faith in him, why do you draft Audric Estime? Why? I guess I got to see him remove Samaje, which everyone expects, but I don't know. I just haven't clicked him. Maybe I need to. And Z-Ball is pointing out too, he just uses ETR's best ball rankings as some of the best of the biz. So you won't get any argument from me if that's going to be your go-to source. They're great. It's as good as it gets. So they are very high on Christian Kirk, and so that's where you want to snag him to stay and build. Totally fine. I think the JMO pick is great. You have Laporta, gives you that option for a late Goff. I think we gave you a little gift there and not taking Goff where we could have, but I liked where we took Chase Brown there. We'll get to our own team in a sec. I mean, he built out a good Cardinals team, a good Lions stack. He got a little bit of that game, I love, with the Week 17 Jags and Titans. So I like what he did. I do like what Z-Balls did. I'm not just saying it. Anybody who's watched the show long enough knows I'll never just blow smoke up people's asses because they're watching. I'm glad you watched. I hope you come back and draft with us every week at this time. But I love through those first 4 rounds. The interesting part is that, the triple the double tap on QB, right? Getting Kirk Cousins to now link with Drake London. Some might say too much quarterback capital. I look at Kirk Cousins' playoff schedule, and I'm like, good Lord, that is he could go. This could be 3 straight games of the Cousins of 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Achilles is obviously I think everybody just forgets him and Rodgers coming off Achilles, and it's a death knell for running backs. Who knows what it will be for quarterbacks, but it's a stab that made sense there. I'm looking at who went afterwards, and I don't know that any of them would make more sense for his team with Drake London and that unique 3 QB build, the Leone strategy. I think it works. Then you mix in Algier, who I love. If I don't have Bijan and I'm doing a Falcons thing, I love Algier. Algier is one I need to work in more too, because in that range I'm often going Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, but it's why not? We know what Algier is. When he starts and gets volume, he's really, really good. One of the most efficient runners in the league. So if we're playing the handcuff game at that point, why not go the guy in an offense we think is going to take a step, a Zach Robinson scheme that we think is really good, and unlike the rookies, a guy we've seen actually do it and do it really, really well. I've been having that thought on Algier a lot. So yeah, those are a few. Just toss them out there. Thoughts. What do you think to any of those and any other things with this team?
Yeah, I think just in terms of getting stacks and game stacks and stuff, just stacks, well-constructed team. I think, the Kirk Cousins there may have been a bit of overkill, but it's not the end of the world. Where there's no guarantees whether or not that was structurally sound, but followed it up with a good Algier pick and then Wilson to slot in with the Arizona stuff. So obviously drafting with proper roster construction in mind and the stacking nature of everything. So all around, I think this was a solid team. I like Chig as a late round tight end. Rondale slots in there with your Atlanta stuff you got going on. So the only point of contention is just whether or not the third QB was overkill, but even with the third QB, made the roster make sense. And that's just what I've always talked about. Does the roster paint a picture that makes sense? And in this case, it does. So you can't really complain about any of that. But moving on to our team, starting off.
Thanks, Z, for tuning in and good team. I really do. Yeah. 3 good. If you looked at the projected total points for the season, Lions, Cardinals, and Falcons, I think are all in that certainly top 15, potentially top 10 offenses. And you did a good job stacking a lot of them. And then in the quarterbacks you didn't have stacked, you kind of correlated week 17 with that Jags and Titans game. So I think it's really well constructed. I think that
I agree.
That team could be a bitch to overcome if those 3 quarterbacks, if Cousins is Cousins, every week you're getting something good from that rotation of Murray, Goff, and Cousins. Like that's a good team. That's a quality one. Even if I don't love Javonte, don't love Kirk, it all makes sense. And that's going to be a tough roster. That was nice. To our squad. Sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
No worries. Yeah, and thanks again, Z-Balls, for tuning in and interacting throughout the stream. But yeah, our team, pretty standard, typical start, wide receiver heavy in the early rounds, and then following it up with a running back in round 4 who, like you mentioned during the draft, someone who very reasonably has a case to ascend into that tier of running backs who are worthy of hero RB builds, not necessarily a hero running back, but definitely has the upside to ascend into that upper tier. And then following it up, just like a staple Chris Godwin pick. This is half PPR, but like just a PPR machine typically should see better usage and a better catch rate. Following it up with an elite tight end, once again, kind of semantics on how you define certain things. Not necessarily an elite tight end in terms of capital, but has proven to be able to deliver the spike weeks and fits in nicely with our roster. Already having Ayuk. Anything specific you wanted to point out about these first 6 rounds? I think they're all pretty standard for what we typically do and how we like to build these teams.
Yeah, I would agree. I would point out with Pacheco, the reason why hero running back could potentially apply to him is 22 points per game in games without Jerick McKinnon. This offense takes yet another step forward now with Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, so potentially even more touchdown upside, like nearly 15% target share for Pacheco in those games without McKinnon. Again, a guy we talked about when quote-unquote more casual drafters start jumping in, I think he's going to jump around in ADP just for the sake of people that are like, what? This round 2 guy is going in round 4? Can't have it. So if you want Pacheco, like this is the time to get him. And I do want Pacheco. I really believe that after I have my 3 receivers and I can get a potential top 5 running back right there, I love it. I think it's a phenomenal start in that sense. I do like Godwin. I like Ridley probably a little more, but I think it is good to mix it up. One thing I'm thinking, though, is like, okay, I like where we got Kittle too. It makes sense with our team. The correlation with St. Brown, Ayuk does make sense. I do think Rachaad White, I tweeted this out the other day, I think he's getting a little slept on. I know the rushing, over expectation and success rate and all that, like, are really, really ugly. And he's pretty much a product of volume. But he is, I'd say, borders on an elite receiving back. I don't think he's going to lose that role, even though Bucky Irving's solid there. And over the last few games, I listened to Matt Waldman, a great running back scout. He talked about how it did start to seem to click a little bit more for Rachaad White, taking less hits by line of scrimmage, making sure to get, even if there wasn't a clear lane, kind of always starting to move forward. Like there was a little bit of switch there. But I think also what's really starting to click for me with Rachaad White, we talk about why we like Godwin, the Cooper Kupp role in this next Sean McVay. We're all about, I like how we built our team because I am all about chasing the next Sean McVay type clone, the next Shanahan clone. Those offenses, the Kevin O'Connells, the Mike McDaniels, they all seem to pan out. And Liam Cohen is a Sean McVay disciple. And so I like that for Godwin. I think it's great to lay up targets. I think it could mean huge things for Rachaad White. And people aren't talking about that. Like his first quote was marrying the run and pass game. That last time I saw that quote was Todd Gurley in 2017 when Sean McVay arrived and he broke fantasy. I don't think that Rachaad White has the talent to break fantasy at the level of Todd Gurley, not even close. But I do think if he's used in that Todd Gurley role on an offense that we expect to be pretty solid, I'm starting to think Rachaad White in round 6 is somebody I want to get a little bit more of. We took him in a recent draft. We got him in like 70s, which was absurd to me. But the fact that we already had Godwin and that Rachaad White is a guy that correlates with your quarterback at running back quite well, he's one that I might have given a second look to a little bit more in future drafts and especially on this team build. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on White? He's someone I'm warming up to and I wanted to kind of gauge your interest in.
I prefer Kittle with this team just because of I just like we've kind of harped on it continuously, preferring a tight end in the first 6-7 rounds, and he lines up with what we were doing already. But I agree, like the outcome where we look back and we're like, how the hell was Rachaad White like regularly there in the 60s? It's very realistic. And the knock on Rachaad White is that he was inefficient, and that if there was anyone competent in that backfield, like someone would take touches. But Bucky Irving, I mean, like I'm a fan, but like they're like him actively competing and taking touches for Rachaad White, it's no guarantee. So yeah,
it's one of the worst combines like in the history of RAS scores. So
exactly.
I like him too. I really do. I actually do like Bucky. It's the reason I'm not high on him. But you're absolutely right. Like, is that the reason we're letting Rachaad White, the running back, 4 or 5 last year, second
4
total touches, fall all the way to round 6 in a situation that's probably the same, if not the scheme's even better because it's this McVay disciple? I don't know. Just something I've been thinking a lot about for sure. And I think you brought up a lot of the warts, but yeah, he's something that's interesting. You're right too, though, with this team, especially like the way it played out. Our tight end would have been horrendous if we hadn't gone Kittle here. And I like what our running back room is. So like, I definitely agree. Like the way our team played out, I think it's fine that we passed on White, no doubt. But yeah, no, I think it's fair to consider. And then there's like we could have gone McBride and correlated with Cooper Kupp a little bit instead of Pacheco, but I'm with you that Pacheco's a guy I want to get more and more of before his price starts to skyrocket. So yeah, no, I think that all makes sense. We go Ramondre, just kind of that like running back zone where it's time to take the Shrek turd and pluck these running backs. But one of my points of contention was that little bit of orange that worked its way into our Shrek turd in Cortland Sutton. So you liked him. I know we've already talked about him a lot. So we don't necessarily need to belabor it. I think I would have liked it a lot more had Bo Nix, had we completed it with Bo Nix.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like the Browns. I mean the Bengals. We added Chase Brown, Jermaine Burton, like starting to build that game up a little bit. It's a fun game. I think it's a very fun game, and it would have been fun to have a quarterback in it for sure. Which we couldn't have. What do you do? Bo Nix went 20 picks ahead of his ADP, but the guy was building it out. So, yeah, where do we take Sutton relative to his ADP? I feel like that's like, isn't that like a few like solid like 8 to 10 picks ahead of ADP there for him?
Right, it's right on the nose.
Right on the nose, huh? That's where he goes.
I mean, maybe one pick ahead, but right there at right around 90. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I do. Again, I've already argued for why I like Sutton. Sutton is one of the most underrated players in the big board drafts. It was again when he was going 20 picks later, but I can make the case for Sutton. I haven't made the words have come out of my mouth. I've made the case for Sutton. So like it's not the end of the world, and I like that we went B-Rob after all the points you laid out. I thought that was a great compelling argument for him. I think Benson was probably the other guy we were considering there, right? Like with the Rams correlation, the upside rookie.
Yeah.
I like B-Rob there.
I like it too. And then moving on to the next couple of picks, like just all stuff that checks out with what we're trying to do from a stacking perspective. Purdy to go along with Kittle and Ayuk, Chase Brown with big plans of a Denver stack later on potentially. Pearsall and fits into that 49ers stuff. Burton fits into the Bengals and Denver stuff, and then got to start addressing quarterback and tight end with Mayfield and Otten there to finish up what we were doing with Godwin earlier. Anything else to say about these guys? I think like in terms of just taking some contingent upside swings for the most part with Pearsall and Burton, I think it checks out with what we did in terms of being wide receiver heavy early on, and then Mayfield and Otten, not the most exciting picks, but it allows us to have sound roster construction.
Yeah, in that area, we questioned like the Burton and Stafford. Like, we Stafford ends up going, so we don't get him. We pushed him, got a little greedy. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think Baker and Stafford are relatively similar. I would prefer Stafford, sure, absolutely. But I'm fine with it the way it played out, just because you look at how the receivers drop off. Like, and again, we don't know what Burton will be. He might be a nothing. But there is some real upside if Higgins gets hurt. If he just is the third receiver and he reaches the upside we saw in college, like you just don't get that later. You really don't in this receiver economy right now. Like Mims went pretty early. Sometimes you get that Mims later, and he's far from a guarantee. So I'm okay taking that stab on Burton, especially the way we had we not had Sutton on the roster, I might not have thought about it, but the way we had Chase Brown, we had Sutton, it made sense. I really like that. I don't regret that one. Going Cade Otton and not getting Bucky Irving's a little bit like, would Otton have probably had a better shot at making it back? Because Irving, you don't need a Bucks thing to take Irving. So I might have flipped those two and seen if we could have gotten Otton where we took Elijah Mitchell and rather have Irving and Otton rather than Mitchell and Otton right now. But Mitchell's great too. Like I think Mitchell's he's the clear number 2 to the best running back situation in fantasy football. I think he's definitely going underappreciated. So I'm fine with that. I think the only thing with all the picks, I thought everything ended up flowing fine. We were attacking it the right way. It does suck that we missed on Bo Nix. Again, going 20-something picks, but we should have seen it coming. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, it's all when you're doing a stream, it's so hard to notice these things when you're talking about it. But had we either of us been on our phone, we've been yeah, Bo Nix. And even if we had known it's coming, would we have really gone Nix over Elijah Mitchell? I don't know, maybe. But I think I don't know that I would have. But what I would have 100% done is taken Juwan Johnson to give myself the shot at a backdoor Derek Carr. Because if you don't get it, you still get a third tight end with good touchdown equity on a team that could use it with Otton and Kittle. As much as we love Kittle, it is up and down for sure. So I think that's the one move. If I could pick anything to change on this team, as pathetic and weird as that is, it's round 17, Juwan Johnson instead of Khalif Raymond set up a backdoor with Derek Carr. It's really it's a pretty good team if that's how you feel, right? If that's the biggest
I agree.
Thing. I think it's solid, but
it would have ended up making a lot more sense. But it is what it is. I mean, I highly doubt that a missing on a Juwan Johnson stack is what costs us success on this team, but you never know. So, but I agree. That would have been
that type of guy that has 20 points. But we've already said Khalif Raymond's the guy that we need at the end of a draft that we missed on. So maybe it's just always the guy that we don't take at the end of the draft is the one that haunts us for that week.
Exactly.
I like it though. I think it's a quality squad. I'm not quite as in love with it as I was last, Monday squad where we got CJ Stroud, 12 packs past ADP that did a backdoor with the Packers. I thought that team that's my favorite we've done so far. But this one's good. This one is solid.
Definitely, I agree.
So I like what we did. In terms of does turn out one real time is Thaddeus. It's the one and only. Sup, fellas? Great to see you, Thaddeus. Undercover these days. I wonder what's going on with the other account, but hey, you're here. Mixing Javonte about to blow. I don't know if that means blow up or blow.
Probably suck.
Right, yeah, exactly. So let us know what you need there one real time. Whether you love Javonte, you think he's going to blow up, or you think he's just going to blow. I love Pacheco. Looks like you do too. We talked about that again without McKinnon. And then Mr. 305, Trace Cinco, Pitbull, a big fan of the stream. Great to see you. Lobo, I hope all is well. Good to see you as well. I hope all is well with you. And this is the fun part of the offseason where you start to see some of the regulars work their way out of the woodwork and come say hello. Exactly. You see, I saw Mitch Chavez earlier. You see all the regulars. But now we're building up new regulars too, which is awesome with this stream. Thaddeus is hopefully UZ balls. Seems like a few of you guys are definitely starting to tune in each and every week, which is greatly appreciated. We hope you continue to do so this summer. And if you're one of the 267 that is watching but not subscribed, come on over to YouTube. We really appreciate any boost to those sub numbers, climbing close and close. I think we're about 100 away from 4K. We'd love to hit that by the end of July. And if you could help us out, it would mean the world. And any thumbs up on this, wherever you're watching, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, anywhere at all, that type of stuff helps us out. And of course, the last plug is rotostreetjournal.com, where we house all of our written content, all of my rankings, just to pump my latest pieces. I wrote that. I was hyping it up last week. I ended up coming up with it, and it did really, really well, is the hero running back strategy and the 6 running backs I would consider taking in rounds 1 or 2, particularly with best ball. I think the one thing I might dive back in there and add is Kyron Williams. At minimum, deserves an honorable mention, if not potentially hero running back consideration too, depending on how this all plays out in training camp with Blake Corum. But overall, really pumped with how that article came out and how it was well received So if you're interested in some early running backs, or at least considering the hero running back strategy, definitely check that out. And I did a follow-up breakdown on Devon Achane because he was kind of the most asked about guy from that article. So I did a more in-depth breakdown on him as well. So those are my 2 most recent pieces. Mo, any recent stuff on the site or anywhere else you'd like to pump?
PPR running back targets, just like guys heavily used in the pass game. That's up on the site right now. Coming up, I'll be doing a positional breakout series, just talking about some guys who could be in store for some massive seasons. And then something I've been messing around with, kind of alluded to it earlier, just the impact of motion within offenses and how that drives players' fantasy production and value. So kind of tinkering with the data behind that, and should, if all goes according to plan, be something pretty cool and discuss, because that's just kind of one of the trendy NFL topics right now, and it's obviously worked for some of the better offenses in the league. So talking about how we can apply it to fantasy.
I'm sure you've seen Jacob Gibbs, some of his work on that stuff, right? If not, you definitely should. Yeah, that's a really cool. I'd love to read that. That sounds phenomenal. All that stuff sounds great, but that's really unique, and you don't get, you don't see that very often out there. I think it's definitely untapped, unexplored in the fantasy landscape. So I think that would be an awesome piece. Very cool, guys. Well, again, check out rotostreetjournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves. Check out at RotoStreetWolf on Twitter, where you can find me, at Mo_FFB, where you can find my man who's with me here every Monday at 4 p.m. We will be back. Next week I am on vacation. This might be the Mo solo stream. We'll see how it goes for you, or if someone else hops on with you, or if you want to take the week off, totally fine as well. I will be on a family trip, guys, next week. So, and it's in the middle of nowhere, Maine. I normally would try to find a way to find a back room and stream, but there's no Wi-Fi, there's no service. It's like a complete disconnect from the world type of trip. So I will not be live on Monday next week. Maybe Mo will be, who knows? But it's that could also be the mini vacation week for us, and then we'll be back after things once we get back. So thanks again for tuning on in, guys. RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves, and in the world of fantasy sheep, be the wolf, guys. Later.